If it wasn't for the Cowlitz River that separates these two cities, it would be pretty hard to distinguish where one city ends and the other begins. However, these two cities tell two completely different stories. One city was created to be an idealistic and beautiful, yet functional place, while the other, in its current state, appears to be a sad-looking shell of its former self. Today, we are exploring the cities of Kelso and Longview, Washington. If you're traveling on Interstate 5 between Portland and Seattle, it's pretty hard to miss the city of Kelso. With a commercial center seated along the interstate, it has plenty of offerings for road-weary travelers. However, when you pull off, there is almost instantly a feeling that the city is struggling. The Three Rivers Mall, which is immediately beside the interstate, is nearly empty. The space inside of it that was busiest was actually a food bank handing out food to people in need, which is a great thing to do, but perhaps is not the ideal store to bring business to a struggling mall. There are plenty of restaurants here, as well as gas stations, hotels, and other travel-related commerce. But no matter where you go in Kelso, I just felt this overwhelming feeling of sadness and depression. However, stick around because I will get to some positives for Kelso too. I never like to run a town's name through the mud when I would be completely out of line, not to point out the positive things happening there too. This community was originally inhabited by members of the Cowlitz Native American tribe, with about 6,000 natives recorded here in the mid-1800s. The area was named after Kelso, Scotland, the hometown of a surveyor that platted the city area in 1884. Since this was a logging region, this area quickly built up with taverns and brothels to serve the men of the logging industry, which earned Kelso the nickname of Little Chicago. All of the shady dealings here were brought to an end in the 1950s, when the FBI forced the mayor to finally shut them down, with the last brothel here closing in the 1960s. Wood has always been a large part of the economy here. However, that is not all that has been an industry here. Commercial smelt fishing has also been a large industry, but today the number of smelt in the region has dramatically decreased due to overharvesting and other environmental factors. Today, some of the largest employers in Kelso are public services, Foster Farms, and some of the bigger stores here such as Safeway and Target. Downtown, there are plenty of really great historical buildings to see, including the train depot, which was built in 1912 for the Northern Pacific Railroad. Today, it still serves passengers on 2 Amtrak lines. I also thought this old theater was a neat building, which appears to have found some new life as a cafe and movie theater. If my research is correct, this theater first opened back in 1917. It is obvious that this downtown area used to be a really nice place, but sadly today so much of it sits empty or has somewhat sketchy-looking tenants, stores that I would never pop my head into personally. I hope something can be done to bring back some business to this side of the river, as it has so much potential that is not being tapped into. One of the best things in Kelso is the Cowlitz County Historical Museum. This is an absolutely free museum that I found to be very well displayed, and I felt was much more professionally done than I would expect from everything else that I had observed in this little city. The lady at the desk was friendly and offered to answer any questions I had, but honestly, everything is so well documented in the signage that I really didn't have any questions. I highly recommend to stop into this little museum if you are interested in learning the history of this part of southern Washington. Right around the corner from the museum is the Cowlitz County Courthouse. There is another little museum, if you could even call it that, within the mall in Kelso, the Longview, Kelso and Rainier Model Railroad Club. The 2 older gentlemen that were manning the displays were very eager to talk about their model railroads, and it was fun to look around for a few minutes, and certainly would be one of the only things that redeemed that mall for me. A quick drive across the river brings us to the city of Longview, whose story is vastly different from that of Kelso. Longview was a planned city built entirely by design, a design that was created by this guy, Robert Long, just a little over 100 years ago. However, before I get to that part of Longview's history, we need to talk about a significant event that happened here before that, with the Monticello Convention. This area was originally called Monticello, named after Thomas Jefferson's Virginia home. In 1852, people from all over the region that would later become Washington State gathered at Monticello to draft a memorial to Congress, petitioning to become their own state, which they proposed to be called Columbia. This meeting was known as the Monticello Convention and would lead to the formation of the state of Washington, named after our first president, as opposed to the proposed name of Columbia suggested in the convention. This monument stands to remember this momentous event for the Washington Territory. Back to the story of Longview, though. In 1918, the Long-Bell Timber Company was facing hard times. After clear-cutting their existing land claims, the company had big decisions to make. Should they move operations and continue in the timber industry, or should they focus on other commercial operations that they were running? The decision was made to find a new location, which was decided upon here. A single timber mill was to be placed here according to the original plan, but that plan quickly expanded into a plan to build 2 mills. With little more than just wild forest on the site, and a need for over 14,000 workers for these mills, a town would be needed to support the workers of the mills. Other lumber mills of that time had terrible conditions in the pop-up towns that were built up aimlessly around the mills. They were placed without much planning or concern and led to horrible living conditions for these men and their families. More land was secured, dikes would be built to contain the river, and major planning went into everything from the lumber operations to railroads to be built, to the city that would be built and is still here today, Longview. The city was originally designed to support up to 75,000 people. Today, the city is bustling and is quite a beautiful little place to walk around. I spent a good long time just exploring around the city park in the middle of the old part of town. Along the perimeter of the park is the Longview Public Library, the Monticello Hotel, the post office, and the city offices. There are plenty of signs that explain the history of the town, the people that built this town, and the industry that built this town, all of which turn this park into an open-air museum of sorts. Right across the road from the park is the Long-Bell Shay Locomotive, number 5, which has a little building built over it to protect it from the elements. This oil-burning engine was built in 1923 and placed here in 2013, restored by the local community here. There is also a little statue of a squirrel here, placed in honor of the man that created the Nutty Narrows Squirrel Bridge, which crosses Olympia Way right where the Monticello Convention Park is located. I found it humorous that I happened to catch footage of a squirrel hanging out by the statue. How fitting. Longview is home to Lower Columbia College, which has a fairly substantial campus right behind the city library. I took a long walk through the downtown area. I'll stop talking for a minute now as I show you around town so you can experience Longview, just as I did. Today, the city of Longview has a population of over 38,000 people and has a lot to offer in terms of commercial development, historical sites to visit, and cultural offerings. While I don't know that Longview is quite the idealistic place that it was envisioned to be, it certainly is a great little city to visit and explore if you're passing through the area. I was much more impressed with Longview than I was with Kelso. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of these two Washington cities, just across the river from each other. We'll see you next time, somewhere else, down the road.